taking a deep dive into the business. It's the Turn Podcast, a golf business and experience podcast powered by Troon.
It's another episode of The Turn. I'm Julia. Hello, Kris Strauss. How are you today?
Doing great. Excited about today's topic for The Turn.
Me too. We are talking about revenue management today, and I was shocked to find out that something that was developed back in the 70s in the airplane industry as yield management is used by probably less than 5 or 10% of the clubs around the world today. So, Kris, go ahead and introduce our guests today, because I know you are totally going to geek out on this with them.
Yes, I'm so excited about it because with the rise in demand that we've had as an industry, oftentimes I refer to big rocks along the way that we need to focus on for success. And in the resort, daily fee, municipal golf realm, one of the biggest rocks is revenue management. And today's topic is revenue management. We have the revenue managers from the Troon team on to dive in deep into yield management, utilization, and some pillars around revenue management. And I'll introduce our guest today. That's John Tidenberg and Andy Sorenson. John, why don't you go first, and then Andy, you go next. Explain your background and what you're doing today in the world of revenue management.
For sure. Thanks, Kris. Thanks for having us on, Julia. Yeah, I started with Troon about a year and a half ago now. Got into the revenue manager role. Had a little background in data analytics in the banking industry. And then obviously a huge golfer, worked in the golf industry for a little bit, played professionally for a while. So,
all right, Andy, I know your background came from the operational side of things. So why don't you tell that story?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in the golf business for getting close to 30 years now. The last 22 of that have been with Troon, most of it at the facility level. You know, I just recently moved to the corporate office here to take up this revenue manager's role. But prior to that, at other clubs, I had done basically revenue management at the club level as well. So it just seemed like a natural progression to come to the corporate office and help multiple facilities in that role.
Well, let's talk about just some fundamental building blocks of revenue management. What would you gentlemen say are some basic, foundational steps to take?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that we kind of take a look at, when we're asked to do an assessment or just kind of take a look at a facility for the first time is really dive into their historical, rounds and revenue. Obviously, with so many different T-sheet softwares and systems nowadays, it's not always easy to find those numbers, but it's normally in there somewhere. And just kind of looking at those key metrics, obviously rounds and revenue are the big one. We like to look at utilization, which is, rounds purchased or bought divided by the rounds available. So just really looking at those key metrics and diving in to some of those stats that can ultimately tell you maybe and lead to different pricing and drive additional revenue there.
I'm kind of feeling like it's like Uber surge pricing, isn't it, in a way?
100%. Revenue management and dynamic pricing is used in a lot of different areas of business, whether it be airlines, ticket sales, car rentals. Really, the golf industry has kind of lagged behind when it's come to revenue management and dynamic pricing. We're kind of one of the late adopters when it comes to doing that, unfortunately. But we're finding ways, and we're catching our stride, and we're getting kind of caught up with the rest of the industry to bring that to the golf side of things.
Pre-COVID, I think if you brought up dynamic pricing, somebody, an operator that wasn't as educated or an owner that would be a little fearful of dynamic pricing might say, well, I don't want a discount. What do you have to say about revenue management in the realm of discounting?
First of all, when you talk about dynamic pricing, it's not always discounting, right? You can direct things up or down depending on what your goals are. If you have certain days of the week that are quieter than others, yeah, you might find that the rates go down a little bit as demand is low. But certainly on the days like a Saturday morning, 9 o'clock, you're going to be able to command a rate that's higher than what you'd be getting if it were a static rate. So now you're kind of letting the people choose what they're willing to pay, and you're finding a way to fill your tee sheets and more heavily utilize those tee times that you have, which are a finite resource, and fill them as quickly as possible and for as much money as possible.
Yeah, to Andy's point there, I think just implementing dynamic pricing and just getting it started in some fashion. Like, it doesn't have to be the most, granular hour by hour strategy. It could be something very similar to where you're just changing pricing small amounts, and then you recognize and see what that customer buying behavior is and just adjust off that. So it's not always a set it and forget it type thing. You gotta try things here and then see what that customer does and reacts to, and then maybe make some adjustments off that.
You're both regional revenue managers for Troon in the corporate office. So I take that as a club doesn't necessarily need to have someone on property anymore, if you're a Troon managed club, to manage this dynamic pricing process, right?
Correct. Yeah. So that's where we come into play, right? We work with about 26 different facilities. Obviously Troon manages up into the 700s of facilities, golf facilities. So yeah, that's where we feel like our value comes into play, right? We can take time off of that operator's hands and, dive into that tee sheet for them. Obviously, it's still available for them to do as well. And it's almost a teamwork aspect, right? Like, we're working with the facility and the operator and making these decisions, as we see fit.
Let's say you have a $5 million club, right? And $1 million of that is F&B. $500,000 is retail. A big chunk of that's left, $3.5 million oftentimes is a golf fee revenue. And we have people that are devoted to F&B. We have people that are devoted to retail. Sometimes when it comes to that, in clubs that we first get involved with, or clubs that didn't have a dedicated focus, there's nobody managing that revenue on a day-to-day basis. And that's where you all can help step in and supplement what the operator's doing on a day-to-day basis. So walk us through how that might look if you are supporting a club in that fashion.
Yeah. So like I said, additionally, we kind of take a look at their historical data, kind of get an assessment going and look at some of the findings there. Then we'll kind of set up an hour and a half call with them and kind of just dive into their facility. Oftentimes it's, we're learning more about their facility as well. And just like they're learning about our services or how we can help them, we oftentimes find, what are your revenue management goals, right? Are you trying to drive average rate? Are you trying to add more rounds? There's just so many different unique ways to go about it. From there, going forward, we can set up bi-weekly or monthly calls and just continually do these calls and go through the data and any kind of strategy we see fit.
Right, Andy, from an operator standpoint, how does this help you as an operator?
Ultimately, it takes a lot off of the operator's plate, Kris. Generally at a facility, that sort of role is going to be kind of by committee. Ultimately, you're looking at probably the head pro, the director of golf, and the general manager, people like that are kind of getting all together and doing it at times, but nobody's directly dedicated to it. So there's a lot of things that can slip through the cracks. Plus, people at facilities are tremendously busy. There's a lot going on a day-to-day basis, and it's hard to focus on something that can get as minute as you can with revenue management. Obviously, it's a big picture item, but sometimes you've really got to get small with it and kind of dial in to figure out exact places where you can increase your revenue, because some facilities are doing such a great job. It's no longer kind of giant picture. It's all right. Now where can we scrape together these little crumbs that can add up, to increase revenue at that point?
What are some common mistakes you see, or, from the outside looking in when you first get involved in a property? Like, what are some commonalities you see out there in the industry that we can correct with proper revenue management?
Sure. I'd say one thing that we had seen kind of recently was 7-day-a-week pricing. and there's very few places that can offer the same price 7 days a week. It just generally it doesn't make sense. Why would you a Tuesday at 2 o'clock be the same rate as a Saturday morning at 9 a.m.? It just those two things, just the demand is so different for those times. So to me, that was really something that stood out. And in addition to that, kind of static pricing as well. You might have your traditional, all right, from open until noon, we offer this price. From noon until 2, we offer this price. And then after 2, it's a twilight rate. Well, on any given day, the demand for those times can change, and you just don't know which day is going to be which. So when you add in the dynamic pricing, it kind of lets people find the rates that work for them, and again, helps you fill your T sheet.
Yeah, kind of to Andy's point, just digging in a little more granular and specific. I think a lot of times we don't see, given we recording this the day after President's Day. So, President's Day is kind of one of those floating holidays on a Monday where, a normal Monday you might be charging a certain rate, but on this President's Day holiday, everyone has, or a lot of people, majority have off work, you can get a lot higher demand and charge a higher price. So just little things like that, looking around, it could be Easter. It always falls on a Sunday, but it's not the biggest golfing holiday. So some people think, they should increase prices on any given holiday, and that's not necessarily the case as well there. So see a couple of mistakes in that regard, and just try and help them out.
On the flip side, without naming, golf course names and specifics, share us some stories about where, your refinements have really driven some results for an operator and a client.
Yeah, I think a big one, yeah, like you said, without naming names, just we focused on a couple courses changing their fee mix, right? So that's kind of another big important topic with revenue management on the golf side is, what type of rounds are you going to offer? You have your members, you have your public daily fee side. Are you going to offer an annual pass, and how's that going to look? So just trying to mix and find that fee mix, and how much percentage of rounds do you want coming from the true public? How much percent of rounds do you want coming from the member side? And ultimately just figuring out that best balance that fits their revenue management goals.
Because you can change, you can have upward movement on rate by adjusting the mix, right? Is that what you're saying, in essence saying?
Exactly, right? So daily fee might be charging $150, where annual pass could be only charging $75. Well, if you're bringing more daily fee play at $150 per rate, you're obviously going to generate more green fee revenue.
We just introduced something recently that seems to be working. It's kind of specific to 36-hole facilities, where perhaps you have a buyout on one course. That is going to create demand for the second course. But the thing is you have to make sure that you've got a strategy in place to go ahead and maximize that, because sometimes the use of dynamic pricing between the two courses isn't necessarily connected. So you've got to make sure that is tied in at that point in order to go ahead and so a lot of times the dynamic pricing works well when you've got heavy utilization on one of the two courses. That course will continue to raise the prices up and up, but the two courses don't necessarily interact in that way. So you've got to make sure that you've got it planned for when there's a large event on one course, that you've changed the strategy on the other course to specifically maximize that, almost like you would, as John spoke to earlier, with a holiday, like a Monday holiday where it wouldn't be a normal holiday, because you could have a Tuesday where you've got 144 player outing on one of the two courses, and that all of a sudden creates extra demand on the other one, and you can really maximize your revenue with the correct strategy.
Is that an example of why you don't want to make revenue management a set it and forget it practice, that you always need to be, looking at your tee sheet, every week, making refinements to your strategies along the way?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously around here, The waste management open week is very big, but for some other facilities, there's kind of more localized things that are in different parts of town that will bring in revenue, whether it's a festival or a fair or anything that brings in a large group of people to create demand. You kind of need to be on top of that, so you know and can adjust your prices accordingly and be prepared for that.
I'm thinking about obstacles. If I'm an operator, what do you usually see as an obstacle? Why haven't they done this before? And what kind of technology do you need to support something like this?
Well, obviously, I think the big obstacle everyone would say is time, right? There's not enough time on their hands. But if you do have the time and you are in need and you want to put in revenue management in place, I think, like I mentioned earlier, there's so many different T-sheet softwares. We have a great relationship with NBC Sports Next, who pushes out Golf 365 Pro and Golf 365 Premier. Those are two amazing T-sheets that we work with heavily. And they just allow that dynamic pricing. Once you get it set, it's automated, right? So a customer comes in and books a tee time at one price, then that price will automatically adjust for the next customer. So yeah, it's just kind of diving in, using your operations manager or reaching out to different technology and seeing what's available to them.
Yeah, it seems like most of the T-sheets these days have built-in dynamic pricing available. Some of them are easier to work with than others, but yeah, and I would say one of the biggest obstacles to making that adjustment is the standard of, well, this is the way we've always done it, right? And that comes into play so many times with so many things that we do, and it's not wanting to take that leap and make that adjustment. It's, hey, we're doing really good the way we do things. Why would we want to change it? Well, if you're not changing, you're not evolving, and if you're doing good this way, if you want to add these things in, you can get great, right, at what you're doing. So there's a lot of pluses to be had when it comes to making those adjustments and kind of not getting stuck in your old ways.
I'm hearing a lot of benefits to the operator. What about benefits to the consumer?
Yeah, I think the consumer does get a lot of benefits, right? Because I think the big saying within dynamic pricing is the earlier you book, the more you save, right? Because that's when utilization is lower and that pricing will be lower within the dynamic pricing structure. That's what we've seen success with as far as implementation. So yeah, it's really just allowing the customer to find the right price for them, whether that's at 8 a.m. or 2 p.m., whether what they want to play. There's also a feature where you can charge a different price point for further bookings in advance. So, at a resort destination, a customer might have plans 60 days in advance and they want to lock in that tee time. So then they have the ability to go and look at rates or tee times 60 days in advance and see, what those prices look like and if they're right for them.
So let's talk about booking windows, because you referenced it twice, both in kind of indirectly with your annual passes, and then this latter example with being able to charge a premium if somebody's booking further in advance. So what trends are you seeing in booking windows, and how can adjusting the booking windows help you manage your revenue?
Yeah, it's very interesting when you start thinking about the booking windows, and there are kind of the two schools of thought, right? Booking far in advance. If there's a 90-day booking window for a course, do you charge a premium for those people who are looking to lock in that specific tee time? I've only got a limited amount of time. I can only play between 8 and 10 on this specific date. Or are you looking to create a value to fill up your tee sheet early, so you're offering a discount rate further out? That's kind of what it seems like the airlines do, right? Obviously, there's kind of that sweet spot out there that normally when you book it further in advance, you're going to save more money than if you were to book it the week of your flight. That's just kind of the way things are. So there's definitely the two schools of thoughts with that, but it really depends. I think what we've had more success with ultimately is charging the premium for booking further out. it's a matter of being able to secure that spot. And like we said, you'll especially find with a lot of travel destinations that you want to go ahead and lock in those tee times. But you can also find that there's other booking windows that make sense as well. I worked with a course recently who have a lot of day of or day before bookings as well. So adjustments can be made. If you find that's a trend, you can actually adjust your strategy to where that's now more of a premium as well, in order to maximize the revenue at that point in time. So, and if that's happening there, then you might find another segment of the day or of the booking window, when it's less popular, and you can make adjustments down again to attract people to book, in those windows as well. So it really creates the flexibility to maximize your tee sheets.
I think adding on to Andy's point there, ever since the COVID boom, the golf spike, obviously golf demand has increased, and kind of the trend we're seeing is people that want to book, 30, 60, 90 days in advance, they're normally that less price sensitive customer, right? So they're not as worried about the price. They're willing to pay a little more to lock in that specific tee time that Andy was just talking about. So I think that's a big trend that we're seeing, and it's all obtained by historical data, right? So we're able to go in the system and see what these average booking windows are, seeing how far in advance people, what percent of your tee times are being booked, 60 to 90 days in advance. So that's kind of the good part, is we can back it up with data, our theories. So
awesome.
I know that we this is the opposite of set it and forget it. If you decide you are going to create a revenue management program at your course, there's obviously some analysis that has to go into it. You set up the system, you push go on that. How many times do you have to go back then and look at it and make adjustments?
I think it kind of depends on seasonality, right? So out here in Scottsdale, Arizona, obviously we have, the summer, very hot climate, and then you have the winter, which is normally pretty ideal conditions with 75 degrees. A lot of people will do different seasons based on holiday seasons. So, on average, I think most of our courses have anywhere from 4 seasons to maybe 8 seasons where you have to go in and check. So 4 to 8 times of the year, to really go in the strategy and maybe make changes. Now, obviously, if you want to be looking at the tee sheet as far as revenue management goes all the time, as much as you can. But yeah, as far as actually digging into specific pricing strategies, I would say anywhere from 4 to 8 times a year.
Let's talk about the bump up that you referenced. What on the low end, what are you seeing the price increase when you get a booking? You said there's automation built in there. What's a low end bump up, and what's some of the bigger jumps you've seen in the courses?
Sure, I'd say low end, you're talking about 2% increases as your tee sheet begins to fill with every tee time throughout the hour. We like to use an hourly tee time window in order to really be able to dial things in. You can do it on a daily basis, but we find that once you get it dialed in by the hour, that it works a little better. But 2% on the low end, but you can make 10% jumps with each tee time that are booked. And again, depending on time of year and the demand that's going on, yeah, you could see each tee time jump about 10% for each one booked within an hour. So it can get really, really interesting at that point.
At a club doing 40,000 rounds a year, that can add up to whole lot of new dollars, right?
Right.
There.
Yeah.
Right. But again, for many courses, it can be very seasonal. Where here in Arizona, we definitely have our high season, in the winter and spring, and our low season in the summer. And you can't necessarily do those same sort of things that you would in season and out of season. So you've got to be very reasonable with your expectations when it comes to that.
Yeah, and I'm sure a big question a lot of people are probably thinking is, what ultimately does this revenue management practice get you as far as dollar amount or percentage growth? Just to kind of give some numbers on what we've seen, like adding new clients personally, I would say that first year of implementation, you can see anywhere from like 5 to 10% revenue growth. That's strictly just from greens fees only. That wouldn't include like any membership revenue, membership dues, any of that sort. But yeah, like Kris, like you just mentioned, if you're getting 40, 50,000 rounds and 60, 70% of those are daily fee where you're dynamic pricing, those 2% increases can really add up quickly. So,
and you get some operators that are worried about introducing dynamic pricing at their facility where they've never had it before, and they're afraid that the guests are going to basically shy away from it and be put off by it. But generally that's not the case, because we live our lives in that dynamically priced world already, and people still fly on planes and go to concerts and all that sort of thing. But generally when we do come to a facility and talk to them about dynamically pricing for the first time, we generally look to start very small with those increases. You don't want to kind of get crazy and get too far ahead of yourself when you're introducing that. So we normally recommend starting small with your increases and just kind of ease it in the introduction time, and then you can kind of evolve from there and grow it.
I am appreciative of how hard it probably has been for you both to not share your screen and show data, because I know you are super golf data freaks in a good way. So thank you for that. But I'm guessing that if someone's interested in this, you're going to have all of that data to share. But Troon managed club, non-Troon managed club, what would your advice be to an operator that wants to dip a toe in the revenue management water?
I would just say trust in that and take that leap of faith. It's like Andy has been talking about, we've all been talking about, it's throughout our world. The hotels, airlines, you gotta believe in it and believe that the revenue growth is there for it. Like Andy just mentioned, start small, reach out to us for help.
Yeah, for the Troon related facilities that are out there, these gentlemen and their skill sets and the reporting tools and the methodology they have is at your fingertips. They're available for an assessment. They're available to be your revenue managers if you want to help pass the keys off to them, or something in between where they're giving you the data to make the right decisions. And that's where we've seen a lot of our operators work in. We do have an advisory services division, True Club Solutions, that I know there are some clients that engage us for that, just to focus on the revenue management assessments and recommendations moving forward. So I encourage you to go to troon.com and check that out. And again, true grateful for the work that each of you do. You are moving big rocks in our company in the revenue management world. So again, Andy and John, thank you so much.
Appreciate you having us on. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate being here and being able to talk about this subject that we're so passionate about, and share that with everybody out there. And I would say, like John mentioned earlier, and we talked about, don't be afraid to take that leap and try something new, and at least look into it. On a few occasions, there have been clubs that we've discussed it with, and they find it's just not for them. But the majority of the times that we meet with somebody and the conversations we have, we find that revenue management and dynamic pricing is right for a majority of clubs and can definitely help you be more successful in what you do.
Awesome. So jump in the water is fine. That's what I'm hearing. Thank you, Kris. Thank you, John. Thank you, Andy. And thank you to our listeners. Tune in again next time.
This has been The Turn, a golf business and experience podcast powered by Troon. Every episode is available on troon.com, and subscribe to The Turn podcast through iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, or wherever you prefer to download your favorite shows.